The Holy See's economic scandal continues to unfold as the Vatican's top financial watchdog and head of its financial secretariat are replaced by the Pope. The National Catholic Register's Edward Pentin has details from Rome. And Chick Fil A, under pressure from LGBT activists, ends donations to Christian groups they have long supported. And the Catholic Church is targeted by media outlets for its handling of sex abuse cases. Catholic League President Bill Donahue reacts. And the number of children being homeschooled continues to rise. The founder of one of the fastest growing programs in the U.S., Regina Caeli Academy's KARI BECKMAN, is here to explain why. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. A great show for you tonight. Edward Pentin, Bill Donahue, KARI BECKMAN, and Jennifer Fulwiler are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. First, some news from the world over. On Monday, the Vatican announced that Pope Francis will replace the Holy See's top financial regulator amid a brewing financial scandal over church investments in London real estate. René Brühlhart's mandate as president of the Vatican's Financial Information Authority, or AIF, will not be renewed. The Vatican confirmed that the Pope has chosen Brühlhart's replacement, but will not make an announcement until next week. Joining me now with analysis is the Rome correspondent for the National Catholic Register, Edward Pentin. Ed, thanks for being with us.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
Now, there has been a lot of movement at the financial regulator's office since the Vatican police raided their offices and those of the Secretariat of State in October. 5 people have been let go, Ed, and the Vatican's chief of police resigned. What is going on?
Well, I think what it shows, Raymond, is that the people are getting to the root of a lot of the financial corruption that's been going on, and that we're seeing a certain reaction to that. The raid has been inconclusive, but I think what we're seeing is that there are dubious financial transactions that have taken place in the past, and they're all coming to light. It's partly also because of a change of personnel. I think the new Sostituto, Archbishop Edgar Pena-Parra, is actually doing some quite good things in trying to shake things up and expose some of this wrongdoing.
Now, the AIF, this regulatory oversight institution within the Vatican, it was established by Pope Benedict XVI back in 2010 to move the Vatican Bank toward compliance with international standards on financial crimes, etc. Now, Brühlhart has been president there since 2012, and under his direction, it's been reported, the bank closed thousands of accounts that did not conform to its stated mission. Why did he suddenly quit, Ed?
Well, I think although there has been improvement, he has achieved quite a bit in that position, but he's gradually had his authority and a lot of his powers stripped away. At one point, the AIF did monitor APSA, which is the dicastery responsible for property, real estate in the Vatican, and that was taken away from them. And gradually there's been this steady erosion of his powers, and so now I think he felt really that what's the point in carrying on? It became a sort of empty shell. Now that's speculation, that's from sources that I've heard. I've not heard that from himself, but that does seem to be the reason behind this. And I think his mandate ended a few months ago, but then he was allowed to continue, and then he says that he resigned.
An international network of financial watchdogs has suspended the Vatican's access to its information. The group is called the Egmont Group. It's a Toronto-based network. It contains more than 160 national financial intelligence units from around the world, and they've decided to suspend the Vatican watchdog from access to their secure website. Though their members share information about everything from money laundering to financing of terrorism, tax fraud, according to people familiar with the matter, they want the Vatican out because they question how credible they are at this point, particularly with this financial regulator leaving. He brought a lot of credibility to the post, yes?
Yes, I mean it did bring a lot of credibility. This was done under Benedict, but as I say, I think gradually these regulations that were imposed or enforced by Benedict and then Francis were gradually cut away, and rather the reforms that were hoped for haven't actually materialized. In some senses they have, but generally I think the reforms have not gone as people had hoped, and that there's still a lot of work to do.
The Vatican prosecutor's investigation came in response to a complaint from the Vatican Bank when a request came from the Secretariat of State, Cardinal Parolin, for a loan of more than $110 million to finance this property in London that has become so scandalous in recent days. Real estate investments are typically not handled by the Secretariat of State. There are odd silos, as you mentioned earlier, of financial responsibility at the Vatican. What does the Secretariat of State control vis-a-vis financial holdings? I thought ABSA controlled real estate.
Well, that's the issue, Raymond. And what we understand is that ABSA usually does, and so this whole transaction is rather dubious. Now, he's admitted to handling this,
right.
And we're not quite sure why. The Vatican handles quite a lot of real estate, partly because it was given to the Vatican after the Lateran Pacts by Mussolini in compensation for the confiscation of the Papal States. And so the Vatican has quite a lot of property on its books. But even so, this is a very dubious one because of the fact that the Secretariat of State was in charge of it. And we don't really know why. But it seems to be that the Vatican gets involved or has got involved with rather dubious characters, either intentionally or not. Probably we think not, because they just don't have the wherewithal to investigate these people before they engage with them and do business with them. And I think that's part of the problem. A lot of it is incompetence and naivety rather than so much as bad wrongdoing or intentional wrongdoing.
Yeah, no, they're an easy mark and a naive one. On Tuesday, the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, told Catholic News Agency that he had personally arranged a 2014 loan of 50 million euros from the Vatican Bank to partially fund the purchase of a bankrupt Italian hospital. He then arranged with Cardinal Donald Wuerl, former Archbishop here in Washington, for a grant from the U.S.-based Papal Foundation to cover the loan when it couldn't be repaid. Now, this story has not played well in the United States. I remember when it first came out. How is Rome reacting to this, that Cardinal Parolin was the instrument of this loan that many of the Papal Foundation members considered dubious at best?
Yes, well, this is a story I'm looking into at the moment, Raymond, and I've got some information, but it's not corroborated, so I can't quite go into it in as much detail as I'd like, but it does seem to be the case. The Vatican, or rather people working for the Vatican, pulled a rather deceptive stunt, really, to try and get this money from the Bambino Gesù Hospital, a children's hospital in Rome, given to this other hospital. It's called the IDI,
right.
This 50 million euro loan. And it seems to have been passed or given the go-ahead by Cardinal Parolin, as he admitted, but also Pope Francis, of course, gave the go-ahead, even though they were warned against it. But they were persuaded, as I understand, to do this deal because they considered it to be genuine and above board. But against the wishes and advice of Cardinal Pell, who was dead against it, although he could see the importance of keeping this IDI hospital afloat in order to retain jobs and so forth. He did not say that he did not agree that this was the way, and yet by hook or by crook, if you like, it went ahead. And unfortunately, it's a big loss. It's 50 million euros, which can never be repaid. So it's a huge mistake, and done really by a lot of smoke and mirrors by some other staff, laity primarily. Convincing the Vatican to go through with it. So again, it seems to be incompetence rather than malevolence.
Well, members of the Papal Foundation told me personally, Ed, that they were hesitant about this donation when it was first raised, when it first came to them, and they questioned whether it was to keep the hospital from closing or to cover bad debt. And the cardinals assured them that the Holy Father wanted it, so basically shut up. Former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, I remember, told a concerned board member, raising concerns about the donation was irresponsible and seriously harmful to the Papal Foundation. Your thoughts on all this?
Yes, I mean, what it seems to be the case is that they were desperate, of course, to get this loan funded. It was guaranteed, but they wanted it paid back, and so they came to the Papal Foundation to do that. And I think relying on the good offices and good nature and the generosity of American donors. And this obviously was not acceptable. But I think what's important to point out here too, Raymond, is that this goes back, it's not really Pope Francis so much. So all of a lot of these dubious transactions date back to Cardinal Bertone under Benedict, the former Secretary of State. And a lot of these things were put in place then. So it's not really fair to blame Pope Francis for this. I think although there has been obviously a lot of incompetence and mismanagement under his watch, I think a lot of this began long before he arrived.
And viewers may or may not know, I mean, I certainly didn't know what the Papal Foundation was before I came to this post. The Papal Foundation is a group of very well-heeled and wealthy Catholic donors. These people tend to be very involved in their faith, but they're captains of industry, so they know how to balance a ledger sheet, and they raise questions about the millions that they donate. And I do think some of the cardinals who were on that board, and they are some of the major cardinals in the U.S., were pressuring them to make this donation in spite of their questions and despite their better judgment. And that caused a lot of dislocation at the Papal Foundation, which is a whole other story. But I want to move on, Ed. A criminal prosecutor in Argentina has requested the arrest of Bishop Gustavo Zanchetta. Now, you'll remember, he was accused of sexually abusing 2 seminarians. Zanchetta was suspended from his position at the Vatican Bank, where he was appointed an assessor by Pope Francis in 2017. Now, Zanchetta is currently living at the Casa Santa Marta, where the Holy Father resides. Do you see him being extradited to Argentina to face these charges?
Well, I don't know, Raymond. I mean, it's highly likely. I think the Pope, asked for an investigation. He asked for the CDF also to look into this earlier this year. So he's keen that this gets, or seems to be keen that this gets, they get to the bottom of this. But it is rather odd. I mean, he's basically on the run, if you like, a fugitive from justice, it seems, living in the Casa Santa Marta, in the Pope's residence. So it doesn't look good. The Pope knows him very well. He was considered Cardinal Bergoglio, as he then was, his spiritual father. They were very close. I think he was a deputy within the Bishops' Conference when he was president of the Bishops' Conference. So they know each other very well. And I think the Pope is well aware of what's happened, and as you said, it'll be interesting to see just how he handles this and whether he follows what the law wants.
Ed, you covered the Vatican conference last week. It was called Promoting Digital Child Dignity, and it focused on addressing the online sexual exploitation of children. How is the Vatican involved in this fight?
Yes, this is a very it was a very well-attended meeting here in the Pontifical Academy for Social Sciences. The Vatican has taken quite a strong lead in this, and I think people welcome this very much because the problem of exploitation of children on the internet and sexual abuse of children through trafficking on the internet has become a huge problem. The International Center for Child Exploitation and Missing Children said that it was 100,000 children were suspected of abuse online in 2013. Now that number has soared to apparently 18 million last year. So it's a huge problem, and of course there's all sorts of problems with the internet and children accessing it. And this conference really aimed to try to find action to deal with this and come to agreement both with technology companies. Microsoft was here. We had also other people from NGOs and interreligious leaders too. There were lots of Muslims here and Jews as well, and they were all trying to find ways to help protect children online. And I think it was seemed to be a very successful conference, and that they came up with a 6-point action plan at the end to really try to address it.
Before I let you go, last week it was announced that Cardinal George Pell would be allowed to appeal his case before the High Court in Australia. And a day after that announcement, Pope Francis appointed his replacement, a fellow Jesuit, Reverend Juan Antonio Guerrero Alves. Now, he will be the new Vatican finance minister. Is he up to the challenge, Ed? I'm reading reports that he really has no financial experience. I mean, not over large institutions anyway.
Yes, it is a rather odd appointment, Raymond. I mean, he's been at the Vatican in quite a responsible job since 2017, looking after the provincials, the different provinces of Jesuit provinces around the world from Rome. He's got a degree in economics before he entered the priesthood, so he's got some expertise, but people say not really enough to deal with this kind of work. But at the same time, Cardinal Pell, of course, didn't have huge amounts of expertise either, but he did have a good nous, we believe, for dealing with this kind of thing. But we're not sure quite what he brings to this role. But I think the Pope is, interesting thing is the Pope is appointing more and more Jesuits to
I noticed that.
to front to become front positions, and this is an interesting perspective, I think, because usually Jesuits take a back seat. They try to not take these high-profile positions, but the Pope is pushing them forward to take them, and I think probably because he feels that he can trust Jesuits more than any others, and so I think that's part of it. But we'll have to see how he does with this, because it's interesting, as you say, given his lack of qualifications in a way.
Yeah, we'll see how this shakes out. Ed, I'm thinking of my old friend Cardinal Scioca, who was head of the Governato there at the Holy See, and though he was resisted for years internally, he was one of the few governors of any financial institutions or properties that were able to bring the books to the black and took everything out of the red. And he instituted some protocols and reforms that the moment he left and John Paul II closed his eyes, all those reforms got run over with the ivy of the Vatican and swept away. But we do need people like that who have kind of a clear, tough eye when it comes to these financial matters. And as I've often said, they should have a forensic audit of every diocese of the world, including the Vatican. Then we know where all the bodies are and how everybody is spending this money or not. So, Ed Pentin, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your fine reporting. And you can catch Ed's reporting at ncregister.com and follow him on Twitter at Edward Pentin. Thanks again, Ed.
Thank you, Raymond.
Bill Donahue is next, but first, more news. Fast food giant Chick Fil A bowed to pressure groups announcing they will stop charitable giving to organizations who may have a history of, quote, anti-LGBT views, like the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Chick Fil A ran afoul of gay rights groups back in 2012 when founder and CEO Dan Cathy made remarks opposing same-sex marriage. Atlanta-based Chick Fil A says it will concentrate on charitable efforts, or their charitable efforts rather, on education, homelessness, and hunger. Joining me now with analysis of this and much more is President of the Catholic League and author of the book Common Sense Catholicism, How to Resolve Our Cultural Crisis. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Bill Donahue. How are you, Bill?
Thank you so much for having me, Raymond.
I want to start with this Chick Fil A controversy. I know you have an opinion on this. The chicken giant says they want to be known as a fast food chain. What's wrong with that?
Well, they are a fast food chain, which they had, but they were known for something more than that. They were known for their Christian values. They welcome Christians. They're religion friendly. They closed their stores on Sunday, and they stood up for traditional values. And now they've imploded. And you know what? I hate to say this, but I'm glad they got slapped in the face. You can never appease the hard left. And the gay left, which is notorious in this country, savaged them. And they're going to get savaged again. Not until they own you will they ever back off. Chick Fil A needs to wake up and get a reality check.
The COO there, Bill, at Chick Fil A, he says, as we go into new markets, we need to be clear about who we are. Now, the LGBT group GLAAD is responding. They say Chick Fil A still lacks policies to ensure safe workplaces for LGBT workers. So they're not happy.
Yeah, I didn't know that anybody was being beaten up or raped in Chick Fil A before, but I guess maybe Glad would know more than I do. But you know, the idea, the fact, quite frankly, is Chick Fil A doesn't know who they are. That's the central problem. They had a very Christ-centric kind of corporation, and now they've decided to cave into the left as if the left is going to be satisfied. Glad, in fact, is making my point, and there'll be more on this. You can never appease people who are unreasonable, and you're talking about the extremes here. By definition, they are unreasonable. They need to wake up.
Yeah, how long do you think before they open on Sunday, Bill?
Well, if they're going to go this way, I think they risk the goodwill that they've had with an awful lot of people. It was so nice to see a corporation that was religion friendly, but if they want to go out there now appeal, look, the Salvation Army is not the enemy. For God's sakes, the Salvation Army has done yeoman work over the years. They help the poor. They have toys for the kids at Christmas. They have 3 million volunteers. They're wonderful people. And to demonize them, shame on Chick Fil A.
Yeah, well, the other thing that the Salvation Army pointed out this week, Bill, is that they do more outreach and care for LGBT people in the streets and among the homeless population than any other group in America. So the LGBT activists in this case may be cutting their nose to spite their face, in this case anyway. I want to move on. Pew Research Center released a survey on religion in American life this week. Now, there were some interesting findings. Overall, Americans still view religion as a net positive. But you dug deeper and noticed some differences depending on political outlook. Is there a partisan or even a racial divide to the way religion is viewed in America, Bill?
There's both, and I commend Pew for asking the right questions. I slight them, however, for not emphasizing in their narrative what should be jumping out at people. There's a real problem in this country with white Democrats, not black Democrats. Black Democrats take their religion seriously. White Democrats do not. Democrats in general are regarded by the American people as not being religion friendly. Only 19% say they're religion friendly compared to 54% of Republicans. No, as a matter of fact, white Democrats are afraid of religion. They think that it drives people away. Now, this should really be the headline story of this Pew survey. It's incredible. The Democratic Party has long been welcome now to agnostics and atheists and people who are militant secularists. They are not religion friendly, but it's not with black people, and it's not with Latinos. I want to emphasize that as well. It's basically with white, well-educated people who make up a core center of the Democratic Party. And no wonder people of faith don't feel welcome in the ranks of the Democratic Party. When I was a kid, all the Catholics were Democrats, but that's changed.
I'm going to put the graphic up. What Pew found is that 71% of Republicans view religion as doing more good than harm. But among Democrats, 57% of black Democrats say that's true. Only 39% of white Democrats agree. That's what Bill was referring to. Now, Bill, I was struck by the 63% of all Americans who believe churches should keep out of politics, and the 76% who say they don't want their church to endorse candidates. What's the takeaway here?
Well, I think that's been true for a very long time. Quite frankly, we don't go to church to be told about how good the Republicans are or how good the Democrats are or to demonize either party. If you want to talk more broadly about the macro issues, life issues, and you want to talk about the poor without getting into the weeds and telling us exactly how we're supposed to resolve these difficult problems, that's all fine and good. Because now you're talking about moral values. Once you start getting too specific, that's when everything breaks down. And by the way, there's a message here for the Catholic hierarchy. Only 13% of the American people have any faith in their clergy talking about climate change. That's right, because they don't know any more about that than the average guy walking down the street having a lollipop.
Interesting. And Bill, I have to point this out. We'll put the tweet up. The Vatican's Academy of Social Sciences in the Vatican, they tweeted out the day after the Louisiana governor's race, "We are delighted with the re-election of Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards, who will continue to serve the common good." I mean, how do they know from the Vatican? I was kind of struck by that.
Well, see, they're interested in climate change, which the American people, Catholic and non-Catholic, are saying, listen, that's not your issue. And now they're getting involved in telling us who should win and who should lose in Louisiana. I'm like most Catholics. I know some evangelicals might differ with us on this, but I think that it's best for the clergy on Sunday to give a homily about the grand themes of the gospel, and the second reading and talk about some of the broad issues of the day. I don't want them to be like an ostrich and pretending there aren't some serious problems. Religious liberty is under attack, and they should talk about that. But the more specific they get, the more micro they get, that's when they get into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill, Georgetown University recently hosted a conference on the abuse crisis. It was called Lay Leadership for a Wounded Church and Divided Nation. And then, lessons, directions, and paths forward. They have catchy titles. John Carr and Kim Daniels at the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown hosted the panel. Their final report focuses on 3 areas: diversity, the laity, and clericalism. Your reaction to this report and the panel?
Yeah, it was quite embarrassing, quite frankly, to come up with this kind of an argument. Look, there are 2 parties to the sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. You've got the enabling bishop and you've got the molesting priest. To talk about one without the other is irresponsible. They are doing exactly what the establishment is doing in the Catholic Church, beginning in Rome. They're pretending as if we don't have any kind of molesting priest problem. So they put 100% of the conversation on the enabling bishop. They determine it's clericalism. Let's not even get into whether or not that's true or not. There may be a measure of truth to it. My point is this. They don't want to touch the molesting priest because that gets into the question of homosexuality. You cannot talk about the sexual abuse scandal in the United States without mentioning that 81% of the victims are male and that 78% of them are post-pubescent. Homosexual priests are responsible for almost all of the problem in the Catholic Church, 80% of it. Now, it doesn't mean that most gay priests are molesters. That's certainly not true, as I've said many times before. So what you have to do is to say, what is the link here? I'm not saying homosexuality causes molestation. I am saying there's a relationship here. But just as you wouldn't talk about the drug problem in this country by saying, well, we have the drug lords and we have the drug users, you wouldn't just talk about the drug lords. The drug lords exist because of drug users. The enabling bishops exist because of the molesting priest. Georgetown wants to talk about diversity. Fine, I'm in favor of diversity too, particularly diversity of thought. And I didn't see too many people of a conservative nature invited to this John Carr event. They never are. But you want to talk about diversity, fine. No kid in this country was ever raped because of diversity or clericalism, all right? That has nothing to do with driving some irresponsible person, priest or plumber, to abuse a young person or, for that matter, an adult. So stop with this. It's also obvious. Everybody is running away from what Mary Ebstadt once called the elephant in the sacristy, and it's still there.
Now, what do you make of their recommendations? This Georgetown group recommended the following. As a cure for the sex abuse crisis, focus on gospel mission and build unity. Be both humble and bold, and build partnerships among clergy and lay people. What did they miss here?
Well, first of all, it's very pedestrian. Secondly, if you want to start building bridges with people, that's all fine and good. Operationalize it. You know what this reminds me of? Like an academic conference. Everybody goes there with their papers, and they all feel good about what they've done, and then they walk away, and nobody follows through about anything. And then they come back for the next conference. They never accomplish anything. You never accomplish anything unless you actually hit the ground after the conference. It's not what happens at the conference, it's what happens after the conference, in trying to make sure that the ideas that you have are not nebulous, they just simply die in the vine. But that's what they did at Georgetown, and that's obviously too common in academic circles.
Yeah. Bill, there's been a sudden uptick, and I want to move on to this. I just read a piece in the AP this week, a series of articles, TV reports on how the church does or does not track abusive priests and former priests. Where is this coming from? Why this sudden explosion of reportage focused exclusively on the Catholic Church?
We have 2 reports in the last couple of weeks from AP, 2 from the USA Today. We have them from WCPO in Cincinnati. We have from the Denver Post. We have the Wisconsin Public Radio. It's all over the place. You know what's going on? Let me tell you, this is a game, people. It's a game. We're being played once again. None of these reports, none of them, talk about the fact that 0.005% of the clergy in this country, in the last report of the National Review Board of the USCCB, had a credible accusation made against him. There were 3 substantiated cases out of over 50,000 members of the clergy. That's 0.005%. I'll do the computation because Francesco Cesario, the head of the National Review Board, always wants to lecture the bishops for not doing enough. They never will do the computation to put a accurate picture on this thing. What these groups are doing is this. They're saying that we can't get the Catholic Church on the problem today because it basically doesn't exist in the United States anymore, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back over old cases like the Wisconsin Public Radio. Well, now they want to find out what did they do with the priest after he was laicized.
Right.
Well, what do they do with the employees at the USA Today? What do they do with the employees at the AP? The Catholic Church is no more required by law to track, and by the way, they say supervise. What authority does anybody have as an employer to supervise anyone? Look, and you know, this is amazing. They're playing a game here. And then they say, why aren't they sex offender registered? Because they were accused, stupid. Nobody is a sex offender registered unless he's been convicted. Now, if they don't understand this, there's something else. Has Harvey Weinstein been registered as a sex offender? Of course not, because he hasn't been found guilty. That's the way the system works. They can't get enough dirt on the Catholic Church today, so they're going down this line. And by the way, every one of these secular media outlets that I mentioned, every one of them, failed to ever talk about the rights of accused priests. They're saying they're asking tough questions of somebody who makes an accusation. That's the AP report out now. Well, you're supposed to ask tough questions. If the guy is dead and he committed this alleged offense in 1961, we're just going to allow you to roll in there and say, oh, my memory was jogged because I watched a movie or something of that nature? You're supposed to be able to have some evidence. And I'm glad that the church has lawyers and not altar boys asking the questions of these people, because not all of these people are true victims. Some of them are. Some of them are not. The Catholic Church has to have a twofold approach. We have to have great sensitivity to those who are really victims, and we also have to have great sensitivity to the accused priest. Too many bishops have been intimidated now. They don't want to talk about the rights of accused priests because it makes them sound insensitive to victims. They've got to get over that. Too many priests contact me, including bishops, by the way, who are nervous about what's going on in the Catholic Church because no one's emphasizing the rights of the accused. It's all front-loaded one side. We shouldn't let the secular media drive this. No one's required to supervise somebody once he's let go.
Give me a sense, Bill. You praised the Bishop of Rockville Center for defending the statute of limitations. Now, many, including those in the media, say, wait a minute, these people have been victimized. Shouldn't we open up that statute of limitations to allow everybody to have their voice heard and come forward to at least make the case? You would say what?
Well, first of all, statute of limitation is a basic Fifth Amendment due process right. So that's why even the American Civil Liberties Union and the Catholic League agree on that you cannot get rid of the statute of limitations without violating the rights of the accused. Secondly, if you want to get rid of the statute of limitations, do it across the board. Don't just cherry pick the Catholic Church. Now, they did do that in New York because I pressed for it for years, and so did others. And they finally included the public schools. But guess what's happening? They're going after the Catholic Church. You know why? Because if you go after the public schools, you'd run into a monstrous bureaucracy. That's part of it. The other thing is this, 85 to 90% of the minors in this country who are abused in the home. They're abused typically by live-in boyfriends and stepfathers more than the biological fathers. The women are rarely involved in any of this stuff. And so who's representing them? Nobody. You know why? Because there's no deep pocket. If a gal has a live-in boyfriend, she probably is not a wealthy gal in the first place. If her kid's been raped by her live-in boyfriend, who's going to represent her? There's no money there. It's always about the Catholic Church, and that's what has to be understood. We have to stand up for our rights. We're not treated equally. There's cherry picking going on, and that's an example of religious profiling.
Yeah, and you see, Bill, my position is whether it's a Catholic institution or it's a public school, every institution should be treated in the same way and subjected to the same rules. There shouldn't be special carve-outs for a religious group or otherwise. And if they want full reporting, if they want to track people who've been fired, fine, impose that on everybody. But don't expect it or create a kind of media circus around the Catholic Church, which is just doing what the law requires now. And until public schools or media organizations, as you pointed out, do the same, everybody should kind of be quiet.
Look, AP back in 2007 did a good study on sexual molestation in the public schools. 2016, December 2016, USA did a pretty good study.
Yep.
What they found out by the USA Today is that these states like Ohio, which are coming out with these reports now, and Wisconsin, you know what their scorecard is? They get an F when it comes to reporting a molesting teacher when he leaves their school. So how are you supposed to, you talk about supervising the molester, they're passing the trash. What's going on, not just in Ohio and Wisconsin, it's going across the United States.
Thank you, Bill. We're going to leave it there. You can follow the work of Bill Donahue and the Catholic League at catholicleague.org. And his book, Common Sense Catholicism, is at bookstores everywhere and online. Due to the rapid decline in the quality of public education and the indoctrination that some students experience, interest in homeschooling is at an all-time high. A recent report titled 2019 Schooling in America shows that 15% of parents would choose homeschooling over other forms of education. That's up from only 5% in 2012. My next guest is the executive director and founder of one of the fastest growing homeschool programs in the United States, Regina Caeli Academy. She's with me tonight to talk about why homeschooling is taking off here in the U.S. and around the world, and why it benefits kids and parents. Please welcome KARI BECKMAN to the show. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
Okay,
Raymond.
when did you personally decide, you have 8 children, that you were going to homeschool your children, and what drove you to that decision?
So back in the year 2000, we were really kind of faced with, we were having our 4th child. And was the Catholic school model going to work for us? We're open to life. I'm in the middle of my childbearing years. Can we keep up with the economics of it? That was one of the questions. The other question was, as converts, my husband and I are both converts to the faith, we were really relying on the Catholic school to be able to form our children in the faith. And honestly, we were finding some issues with that. And so we're making these ginormous sacrifices financially, only to kind of battle to get our kids really formed well in the faith. And so that's when we started to say, okay, what can we do? What should we do? And I'm going to tell you, 6 weeks before I started homeschooling, I said I would never homeschool my children.
But you made the leap.
I did. And a little bit about my background, I had worked in public education, particularly at the Department of Education in Arizona and Georgia. So I really thought that children belonged in school. They needed the school experience.
So then in 2003, you and your husband found Regina Caeli Academy. Why?
Well, because I definitely saw that in our homeschooling experience that we needed a little bit more structure. Particularly my own personality. We were really 100% on the field tripping. I had that totally down.
Field trip a day.
Yes, it was like we saw every museum in the Southeast, right?
Love it.
But I would fall behind in things like math, and I'd find myself trying to do Christmas and catch up, and it just was very stressful. And so I said, I need something to hold me accountable. And I went to spiritual direction. I was talking about those crosses, and I said, boy, if we could just do this 2 days a week, and started really talking about it and praying about it. And at that time, I was told, let's do this.
So, and Regina Caeli explained to people, it's a hybrid where 2 days a week they are in a physical school at a determined structure where the kids come together, and the rest of the week they're homeschooled.
That's correct. And so in those 2 days, what happens is the students, first of all, they understand what it means to be accountable to another authority besides just mom or dad, which is important, right? We're going to have that in our lives. Secondarily, they get the classroom experience that is a good peer experience. One of the things that in our culture is so broken and has taken a nosedive, quite frankly, since 2003. I mean, particularly the last 7 to 8 years, it's unbelievable. And so now we have classes of 30, 12-year-old boys and girls all trying to teach each other 5 days a week, and they're not teaching each other math, right? And so this 2-day-a-week model keeps the greatest influence on your child and the greatest formation, the family. With a healthy amount of peer influence.
And who's teaching? Who is teaching in the program? Are you bringing teachers in, or is it parents?
We do both. Firstly, you'll be amazed at the gifts and talents that homeschooling parents have. I mean, most of my moms are very highly degreed people, everything from doctors to pharmacists to chemists. So we hire them first because it's really good to have that investment, right? Their kids are in the program, they stay. They don't leave. They stay for years, and they get better at this classical model that we have. Secondarily, we do bring in people from the outside to share up things like physics or Latin if we need it.
What is the acceptance rate in college? This is always the big question. You homeschool the kid, but can he go on to the next level of education?
Absolutely. And I will tell you that colleges seek us out. And it's mostly because this university style of learning that they're already in, the 2-day-a-week model, it's not a transition when they go to college. They're used to it. They're used to being able to have that independence and the expectation that they're going to be ready for the next class meeting time.
Why do you think you all have expanded? I mean, you're now in 7 states, you've got 12 campuses, you're in the UK now. Why has it taken off the way it has and spread beyond Georgia?
Actually, now, Raymond, we're actually bigger than the 12 cities. We're now in 11 states and 16 cities,
wow, okay.
just so you know. Yes,
Thanks,
and the
staff,
UK.
for those statistics. Go ahead.
So,
that's
but
good
it's
news.
been fast, okay? Just don't be easy on them because it's been fast.
Yeah.
I think the reason that we're expanding is sadly because the lack of choice out there. There really is not a choice. If you want your child raised morally and formed intellectually, faith and reason, you have about 2 options, in my estimation. Straight homeschool or find a good hybrid model.
I want to share with you, this is a mother in the UK, a homeschooling parent who had this to say about her experience. Watch.
As a primary school teacher and private tutor, I'm really enjoying home ed, but it has its challenges too. Mostly for me, the weight of doing it alone. I was very excited then to have the opportunity to be part of the Regina Caeli Academy, and I will be one of the teachers starting in September. I'm looking forward to this incredible opportunity to educate our children together in a guided, close community using a tried and tested curriculum.
The heart of this is the idea that parents are the first educators. They're being educated by teachers and other parents, but you are still driving the whole process.
I imagine this experience is one you hear often. What is driving parents to do this, to dedicate this kind of time to homeschooling? What are you hearing here in the United States specifically, where they say, you know what, I don't want to be a part of that public or that Catholic education, I'm going to do this at home?
So I'm hearing a couple of things. Firstly, you know, we are living in militants of ideological corruption, right? It's a militant now aspect to it. For example, here in Fairfax County, they now have a non-exemption clause. You can't even exempt your kindergartner out of hearing about Johnny wants to be Joanne, right? I mean, these are times that we never even thought we would live in. Back when I was in school, if your parents didn't want you in sex ed, you went to the library, you went to the gym, right? No big deal. There were a lot of us who did that. Now it is a militant attempt at indoctrination of your child's formation. So you don't have a choice anymore. How do you parent that? I think parents are coming to realize that the only way to parent is to do it 100%, including their education. And actually, Raymond, this gets back to the heart of the classical method anyway. You cannot divorce an intellectual education and moral formation. They must be one integrated method.
Are dioceses supportive of this, or do they consider this competition?
You know, that's a good question. It depends on where we are. I have some bishops that love Regina Caeli, that have written letters to their pastor saying, welcome this into our diocese. Then I have some that aren't so excited about us being there.
What's next?
I do not know what's next, right? We have every day, it's a different ask for us. I never thought we would be certainly over the pond, and just recently I had a meeting with a group of parents from New Zealand. So, and every single week we get inquiries from 5 to 7 cities in the U.S.
Amazing, amazing. And how does this curriculum differ, just before I let you go? Has technology changed at all the way you're communicating with these parents? And how did the curriculum develop? Was it in conjunction with parents, or is it something you said, no, this is the model that we expect all of our members to adhere to?
Yeah, so that's a really unique part of Regina Caeli. It is the model that you plug into. It's not something that's changing. And we actually have our students read from books, bound pages with hardcovers on them. We're not doing any technology at all while we're at the center. Now, in the home, parents can do that. And I always use the example of my oldest son, who's in IT now, for example. He always says to me, you know, Mom, we had limited IT growing up. It took me about a day to know my Mac better than you knew your Mac, right? So technology is changing. When parents think that, oh, it's so important for a second grader to have technology education, the technology education they have today is going to be completely obsolete by the time they actually need it.
Yeah. Now, you have an interesting modesty and media policy. What is it?
We do. So our modesty policy actually comes from the church, shoulders to knees and everything in between being covered at all times. Not only are our students in uniforms, but we as staff members wear uniforms on Mondays and Thursdays. And our media policy is unique, not just in the fact that we're not using technology in the classroom, but also that we limit what the children are talking about from an outside source. So what that means is we're trying to have them focus on the good, the beautiful, and true. We want to really have deep discussions on things like, was Achilles a just man, right? I mean, these are not discussions that you can have in 10 or 15 minutes. These are we want them to transcend into lunchtime and into their social time. And so this also allows the parent to truly select what it is, the media that their children are going to consume. If we did not have this policy, Johnny to your right, Jack to your left would teach your children all about the media you've told them they can't consume. So this is why we have that policy.
KARI BECKMAN, thank you for being here. For more about the Regina Caeli Academy and its executive director, KARI BECKMAN, visit rcahybrid.org. KARI, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Finally tonight, she's the host of her own radio show on Sirius XM, the mother of 6, author of 2 books, and most recently she's embarked on a new path as a stand-up comic. I sat down with her recently to talk about her decision to try stand-up and how it helped her get through the loss of her father earlier this year. Here's my interview with Jennifer Fulwiler. Take a look. Now, since you released your second memoir, Jen, which was One Beautiful Dream, about your life, kind of juggling life and family, you have since embarked on this whole new adventure into stand-up comedy. Why?
Well, one of the big things is I realized there were very few people bringing our perspective to stand-up comedy. I enjoy watching stand-up comedy specials. I like following it. And I said, where are the women of faith? Where are the Catholics? Where are the people who live in the suburbs and drive minivans? And I thought I'd give it a shot, and it worked. It worked better than I thought it would.
Wow. Now, why stand-up comedy, though? I mean, this seems to be a big leap from you went from atheist to apologist to now stand-up comedyist.
I realized that the best feedback I got from my books and from my radio show and everything was people said, we like it when you're funny. And so I thought, well, what is the most pure form of being funny? It's stand-up. And like I said, I tried it once. I didn't think it would go anywhere, but it started working so well, I thought, well, I think I'll stick with this.
Comedy is known for being, at least comedy I love, it has an edge of cruelty to it. I mean, most comedy does, which is why if you talk to, and I'm going to, of happy memory, Jerry Lewis used to say, women aren't funny.
Right.
What would you say to that?
I would say women aren't funny when they try to do certain types of humor. I do think that we should all admit that men and women thrive better in different types of humor. So as a woman, I am not going to make the same jokes that one of the famous comedians of old would make. But I think that when you find your niche and you find out what people want from
Respond to.
Right, because I think that one of the reasons we love comedy is it makes the world make sense. And I think we want different things from different comedians. And the greatest thing you can do as a comedian is know what people want from you.
Now, your father recently passed away.
Yes.
This is a big turn. But I remember at the end of September, and it was very sudden.
Very sudden.
He was close to you. You're his only child.
I'm his only child. He was an only child, and my parents were divorced, so we were very close. We saw him every day. He took my children to all of their activities. He was in my house every single day.
Wow. You were in Atlanta when you got the news, about to do a comedy gig. How do you do that?
Honestly, being Catholic was a big part of it. It's part of our faith that suffering and joy, comedy and tragedy naturally go hand in hand when you're Catholic. And I, in a way, it sort of all made sense that I would go out on stage and laugh. I knew that people had flown in to come to that show. I said, I can't cancel this show. The show must go on, and I did it in his memory, and the crowd was laughing the whole time. It was a great show, but I will admit it was a very surreal experience.
Yeah. Well, tell me about the first time you got up on that stage to do comedy, because it's a very different. Stand-up is a very different thing than radio or anything else.
Well, you know why it's different?
It's a tightrope.
Everyone knows if you fail. When you're giving a regular talk, the audience is supposed to be quiet. When you make a joke and you don't get a laugh, everybody knows. So I went down to a dive bar in my hometown. I was the only woman of 30 comics getting on stage. Most comics were 25 years old. The crowd was, everyone was intoxicated. And I got up on that stage and I completely bombed. I think I got one laugh. And it was a pity laugh, to be honest, in my whole set. It was the most humiliating moment, like maybe of my life.
I know a lot of comics, and I've known a lot of comics in my life. Tell me how you build your set, because this is really, it looks improvisatory up there. It's not. It's very choreographed.
Very.
Like TV shows that people think you throw it together. You just show up and look pretty.
So first of all, I always test it in front of crowds who do not know me. It's easy to get your friends to laugh. I need people who've never heard of me. I go to random comedy clubs. But then, Raymond, you probably won't believe this, but I really do this. I put it in a spreadsheet. And I calculate the time between laughs and the laugh level, and I have an algorithm that calculates the ratio of the laugh level vis-a-vis the time between laughs, and it shows me how strong my set is.
What jokes work, what bits pay off.
And it's really helpful that when I see, look, I'm going a full minute here and I don't have a laugh, or I go 3 minutes and they're all one level laughs, I got to cut something, I got to change it.
Fascinating. No, people don't realize that there's a science to it. There's an art to it.
There really is.
But there's a science as well. Fascinating. Jerry Lewis used to have a secretary sit in the first row with a stopwatch.
Really?
Yeah, to time the length of the laughs and the bits and how long they would take, and he would refer to all of that, and that's how he adjusted the act.
I'm so glad to know that. That's a great tip.
Back from the 50s. Yep. How long is the set?
At that point, it was just 5 minutes.
And how long is it now?
Now my set's an hour that I'm touring with.
Wow. And how many cities are you hitting, and why do you think people are responding, and who's coming?
You know, there are obviously a lot of Catholic parents are coming out, but what I'm finding is people are bringing their friends who have totally different lifestyles, totally different belief systems, because comedy unites. It's something that you can invite your boss to. You can invite your neighbor who you don't know very well to. And that's the other thing, that my set is fairly clean. I mean, it's not churchy, squeaky clean, but you know, I'm not going into vulgar territory. So you can invite anyone and know that they're not going to be offended. And so, yeah, we're getting really great crowds at these shows. 7 cities so far.
You're also taping a special.
That's right. We're in Chicago. We are taping a stand-up comedy special. We're going to release it. People will be able to buy it and watch it. And like I said, I hope that it brings our perspective as parents, as people who drive minivans, as Catholics. I hope that it brings this perspective to a wider market and lets people say, wow, these people are actually kind of fun. They have a good time.
And you're still doing the radio show on Sirius?
Yep, every day.
What year? Going into what, your 3rd year, 4th year?
Well, headed into the 5th.
5th year,
yeah,
wow.
Yeah, I've been doing that for a while.
I lose sight of time here.
And that's a lot, to tour, to be live 2 hours every day on a solo talk show, and then do a tour and have 6 kids.
Yeah, that's rough. How do you do that? Do the kids travel with you? Family travels with you?
To most of the events they do.
Really?
Not everyone, but for most of the events they do.
Wow.
Yeah, we got a whole tour going on.
How do you balance this?
Not
Are you driving? Do you all get in a van? What
well,
happens?
for this, we're flying individual kids to different cities, and then the whole family is going to a couple different cities. It's very complicated. It's like moving an army. It's very complicated.
This is Patton has nothing on you. Jen Fulwiler, thank you for being here.
Oh,
Best of luck on the road, and we will see you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. You can find out more about Jennifer Fulwiler, her books, radio show, and comedy tour at jenniferfulwiler.com and on Twitter at Jen Fulwiler. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, you can follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to catch us next week, a Thanksgiving special. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.